My name is Clay Harmon. I'm 39 years old and have lived most of my life by the water. I own a boat repair shop in Gulfport, Mississippi. Nothing fancy, but it's honest work. Salt air, diesel fumes, fiberglass under your nails. It's the kind of job you either love or leave fast. I loved it. I've been married for 7 years to Rachel, a freelance photographer with a soft voice and a sharp eye. She said she liked capturing life in the raw. I guess she didn't like living it quite as much. It was a Thursday when everything unraveled. I was sitting on a worn wooden bench outside Dr. Keller's office, still trying to wrap my head around the words I just heard: stage 2 lymphoma, aggressive, treatable with effort. I nodded a lot, didn't say much. I remember looking at my hands still stained with marine grease from a morning job and thinking, this doesn't look like the hands of a sick man. That's when my phone buzzed. Just a single message from Rachel. I didn't sign up for this. Underneath it, a screenshot of our joint savings account. Balance, $0. Gone, $41,300. 5 years of saving. Vacation money we never used. Emergency funds. All of it. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A glitch. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I finally typed 2 words. Take care. And that was it. When I got home, it was quiet. Too quiet. Rachel's side of the closet was bare, her perfume gone from the dresser. Our wedding photo had been removed from the hallway wall, where it had hung since year 1. All that was left was my dog, Moby, wagging his tail like nothing had changed. At least someone was happy to see me. I sat on the back porch and opened a ginger ale. Doctor said no alcohol once chemo started. The sun was dipping low over the bay, casting long gold streaks across the water. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there feeling something crack but not break. Joe, my next-door neighbor, peeked over the fence. You all right, Clay? He asked. No, I said truthfully, but I will be. Later that night, I pulled out the folder my cousin Meredith had helped me put together last spring. She's an estate attorney and had been after me since my uncle died without a will. Get your house in order, she said. You'll sleep better. Turns out, that folder became my lifeline. Inside were signed documents, medical directives, a draft will. I'd even moved the title of my dad's, Old Boston Whaler, into my name alone. Set up a private account at a local credit union, too. Rachel didn't know about it. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. That night, I called Meredith. She's gone, I said, and she took everything. Meredith didn't ask for details. She just said, come in tomorrow. We'll fix it. And that's when I realized cancer wasn't the hardest part of this story. Not anymore. Rachel and I met in the fall of 2015 at a charity event for the Coast Guard down by the marina. I was donating a free tune-up and weekend sailing trip as part of the auction. She was there taking photos for a friend, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, hair pulled up in one of those messy buns that looks casual but takes effort. I like her laugh. Warm, unforced. The kind of sound that makes a man want to say something funny just to hear it again. She liked that I worked with my hands. Said it was refreshing to meet someone who didn't live on a screen. We dated for a year before moving in together. Married the next spring under a driftwood arch Rachel built herself, down on the beach where the tide lapped just short of our feet. The early years were good. We bought a small house 5 blocks from the marina, a fixer-upper. I redid the porch, the floors, the entire kitchen. She painted murals in the hallway one of a heron mid-flight. I still remember clear as day. Our life felt like something we built, not something we bought. She picked up freelance photo, work weddings, baby portraits, the occasional travel gig. I never asked too many questions about her assignments. She liked her independence, and I respected that. That's what marriage is, right? 2 people walking in the same direction at their own pace. But looking back, I think we stopped walking together sometime around year 5. It started small, the way most things do. Rachel began spending more weekends out of town for photo shoots. She'd come home tired, irritated, more than once snapping at me for leaving tools in the laundry room or forgetting to defrost chicken. She called me predictable in a way that didn't sound like a compliment. When I suggested we take a trip, just brushed it off. I'm always traveling, she said. I need to be home for a bit. Except home didn't seem to include me much anymore. There were subtle shifts, too. She stopped wearing her wedding ring at gigs, said it got in the way of shooting. Then she started locking her phone, turning the screen away when texts came in. I noticed a name that popped up a few times, Bryce, but never asked. I wasn't raised to snoop. My father, a Navy electrician who spent 30 years keeping ships running, used to say, if you have to spy, the trust's already gone. So I didn't snoop. I just made note of the signs and tried to hold the rest together. When my symptoms started, night sweats, the fatigue, the stubborn cough, I figured it was just stress. Long hours, bad diet, turning 40. It wasn't until I found the lump in my neck that I scheduled a checkup. That was late March. By early April, they were using the word lymphoma. I called Rachel from the parking lot after that first appointment. Told her the doctor wanted more tests. Told her I was scared. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, well, I have a shoot this weekend, so let's talk after. That night, she didn't come home. I sat alone on our back porch with Moby curled at my feet, staring out over the water and realizing I already knew. The photo gigs, the missing ring, the locked phony, it had all been leading here. Still, I hoped. A week later, when I got the official diagnosis, stage 2, aggressive but treatable, I called her again. She answered on the second ring. I told her everything. There was silence on the line. Then she said, this is a lot. That's all. No, we'll get through this. No, I'm here. Just a sigh and a promise to come home soon. She didn't. That same day, while I was still trying to figure out what to eat now that chemo was in the cards, she drained our joint savings account. $41,300 gone before I even picked up my prescription. And I realized Rachel hadn't changed overnight. She had been changing for months, maybe longer. I just hadn't wanted to see it. That's when I opened the folder Meredith had helped me build. And it was everything Rachel had forgotten about. The medical trust, the second bank account, the updated deed for my dad's boat. I might have lost the savings, but I hadn't lost everything. The next day, I met Meredith at her office. She brought coffee and a notepad. We sat for an hour going through accounts, passwords, legal documents. She was calm, methodical, exactly what I needed. She took the joint funds. I said, can we do anything? Depends, Meredith said. We can't stop what's gone, but we can stop what's left. And we did. We froze what Rachel hadn't touched. Canceled joint credit cards. Moved the boat dock lease into my name alone. We called the bank and added alerts to every account. I wasn't sure I had the strength to fight, but I knew I had the will to defend what I. The betrayal hurt more than the diagnosis, but I was still standing, and I wasn't about to let that be for nothing. 3 days after Rachel disappeared and our account showed $0, I got a letter in the mail. It came certified, yellow envelope. Postmarked Baton Rouge. Rachel had hired an attorney. Said she was seeking divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. The letter outlined her terms. Half the house, half the value of my dad's old Boston whaler, and sole rights to the artistic contributions she made to our home, specifically a mural she painted in the living room. No mention of the $41,000 she'd already taken. No mention of my diagnosis. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, letter open, Moby's head resting on my lap like he knew what it said. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just picked up the phone and called Meredith. She's either delusional, Meredith said when I showed her the letter, or she thinks you're too sick to fight. I wasn't. Within a week, Meredith had pulled together bank records, call logs, even security cam footage from a neighbor's doorbell showing Rachel leaving the morning she disappeared, suitcase in hand. No backward glance. More damning, the timestamp on her transfer. She'd moved the funds 40 minutes after I called her from DR. Keller's office. 40 minutes. Just enough time, I guess, to decide she was done. We weren't just preparing for divorce. We were preparing for court. It got worse when we traced the money. Rachel hadn't just stuffed it into a personal savings account. She'd moved $30,000 to her brother in Baton Rouge, likely thinking she could shield it under a relative's name. Trouble was, he wasn't too careful. The funds landed in his joint checking account with his girlfriend, and 3 days later, that girlfriend used some of it to pay off her student loans. Meredith smiled when she saw the paper trail. People always forget about secondary account holders, she said. We filed an emergency petition with the county court citing financial abandonment during a medical crisis. The judge issued a temporary freeze on all known accounts linked to Rachel or her family. Her attorney went quiet. For 2 full weeks, we heard nothing. Then came the emails. First one was cold, clinical. My client would prefer to resolve matters amicably. The next one, a little more desperate. In light of Mr. Harmon's medical condition, we hope to avoid protracted litigation. I didn't respond to either, but Rachel did. The text came from a new number, which I knew was her way of trying to get around the block I'd put in place. "This isn't fair," she wrote. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I stared at the message for a while, then typed my reply. "You knew exactly what to do. You left." I didn't hear from her again for a little while, at least. While the lawyers worked, I focused on surviving. The chemo was brutal. It stole my appetite, my hair, and for a few days, even my ability to stand without help. But Moby stayed curled up next to me through it all. Meredith dropped by twice a week with soup or groceries. My neighbor, Joe, mowed my lawn without asking. Folks showed up not in big, dramatic ways, but in quiet ones that reminded me I wasn't alone. Still, there were moments. Late at night, when the house was too quiet. When I missed the sound of a second toothbrush being set in the cup. When I reached for someone who wasn't there. That's when the anger came, not hot and loud, but slow and heavy, like oil in the veins. I'd given Rachel everything I had. Built her a home. Built a life. And when things got hard, she took the money and ran. But I wasn't going to let her win. 2 months into treatment, Meredith filed a countersuit. We requested full ownership of the house, the boat, the mural, and any assets traced to the missing funds. We also requested restitution full repayment of the $30,000 still traceable, plus legal fees. That's when Rachel's lawyer tried to settle. They offered to walk away from the house if I dropped the restitution claim. Meredith looked at me across her desk. "Up to you," she said. "But if you're asking my legal opinion, we got her pinned." I nodded. "Then we finish it." Rachel's lawyer requested mediation. We agreed, mostly to save time and money. The session was set for the following Monday at a neutral law office downtown. She walked in with her attorney and her brother, yes, the same one she sent the money to. He couldn't even look me in the eye. Rachel looked different. Tired. Pale. She had a tan line where her ring used to be. I wondered if she even realized she was still wearing the same earrings I'd given her for our 5th anniversary. She didn't say a word during the mediation. Her lawyer did all the talking. But I watched her face when Meredith read aloud the documentation of my diagnosis, the call records, the transfer logs, the photos of her packing her car. I didn't need her to apologize. I just needed her to understand that actions have consequences. By the end of the day, they folded. Rachel relinquished all claims to the house, the boat, the artwork, and agreed to repay what remained of the fund she hadn't already spent $11,000 wired from her brother's account the next morning. It wasn't all of it, but it was enough. Enough to cover my last 2 treatments. Enough to walk away clean. The morning after the settlement was finalized, I took Moby out to the marina. It had been weeks since I'd stepped foot on the dock. The old Boston whaler was still there, resting quietly in her slip as if waiting for me to come back. The lines were secure, the hull a little dusty but solid. Like worn, but not broken. I climbed aboard and just sat in the captain's chair. No motor running, no plans. Just the sound of gulls overhead and the steady slap of water against the hull. I hadn't realized how much I missed that sound. You don't think about silence until it's replaced by hospital beeps and chemo pumps. This was different. This was the kind of quiet that calmed you. Later that day, I stopped by the repair shop. I hadn't worked a full day since the diagnosis, and the guys had been covering for me best they could. Brian, my foreman, met me at the bay door. "Damn, Clay," he said. "You're looking better." "Feel better too," I said. And I meant it. We didn't talk much about Rachel. Everyone in town knew what happened. Gulfport isn't a big place, and word travels fast, especially when a woman clears out a man's bank account while he's fighting cancer. But folks didn't pity me. That's not the kind of town this is. They brought casseroles. Checked in on Moby when I was too sick to walk him. helped me get the shop through its slow season. They did what good people do. 3 weeks after the settlement, I rang the bell at the cancer center. Last round of chemo. The nurses clapped. I held back tears not because of what I'd been through, but because I'd made it. Still had a long road ahead, but this chapter was closed. When I got home, Meredith was waiting with 2 envelopes. One from the bank confirmation the final $11,000 had been received. The other was from Hermie updated estate documents. "You're clean, Clay," she said. "No loose ends." That night, I opened a bottle of the ginger ale I used to keep on my bedside during chemo and poured it into a glass. Sat on the back porch and raised it like a toast. Not to Rachel, not even to revenge, to still being here, to still having a future. I spent the next few months doing what felt right. Restored the whaler, slow and steady. Took on small repair jobs at the shop. Started walking Moby at the pier every morning, rain or shine. I got stronger. My hair started to grow back patchy at first, then more sure of itself. In early spring, I started teaching a weekend class on small engine repair at the local community college. Nothing fancy, just a few folks who wanted to learn how to fix their own outboards or mowers. But it felt good to be useful again. It felt good to teach. One Saturday, after class, a man named Walt came up to me. Said his wife had passed from lymphoma 10 years ago. He'd taken the class just to feel close to something familiar. We ended up talking on the sidewalk for almost an hour. "I heard what your ex-wife did," he said at the end of it. "Takes a special kind of man to go through that and still show up like this." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Later that week, I got a text from Rachel's old number. I hadn't blocked it. Didn't need to. Silence has a way of being louder than any reply. Her message was short. "I heard you're in remission. I'm glad. I know you'll never forgive me, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry." I stared at it for a while. Typed a few words. Deleted them. In the end, I didn't reply. Some things are better left where they lie. In July, I took Moby out on the water for the first time since all of it began. Just the two of us, the whaler, and the open bay. I let the engine idle, watched the horizon, and thought about what came next. There was a time when that kind of question scared me. Now it felt like possibility. Maybe I'd offer sailing lessons again. Maybe I'd expand a shop. Maybe I'd keep teaching. Or maybe I'd just enjoy each day as a Camino grand plans, no expectations. I wasn't chasing closure anymore. Because the truth is, some endings don't come with neat little bows. Sometimes survival is the win. Sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means living well anyway. And that's what I was. Living. Fully. Quietly. On my own terms. The months rolled on, and with them came a steady rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Every morning started the same. I'd brew a pot of black coffee, clip Moby's leash to his collar, and we'd head down to the shore. Sometimes we'd walk the marina. Other mornings, we'd cut across town to the bayou path where the egrets hunted the shallows. The air smelled of salt and pine and just a little rust from the boatyard. It was familiar. It was mine. By early autumn, I gained back most of the weight I'd lost during chemo. My appetite returned in full swing, and I found myself enjoying the small things again, picking out produce at the farmer's market, grilling on the weekends, baking cornbread with a recipe my mom used to keep taped to the inside of cabinet door. People in town started saying things like, "You're looking like your old self, Clay, and glad to see you back on your feet." I appreciated it, but inside I knew I wasn't my old self. I crossed through something, not just the sickness, but the betrayal too, and come out different on the other side. And that was okay, because I liked the man I was becoming. In October, I officially reopened the shop full-time. It had been operating on half hours since the spring, but with my strength back, I could handle the load again. Business was steady. Word of mouth helped. Folks trusted me not just because I knew boats, but because they saw me show up through the worst of it. That kind of resilience earns you something in a town like Gulfport. One afternoon, a young man named Eli walked into the shop. Said he'd just left the mechanic program in Biloxi, didn't know what he wanted to do, but had grown up around boats. He asked if I ever took on help. I told him I didn't have much to offer, just honest work and fair pay. "I'll take it," he said, without hesitation. Hiring Eli turned out to be one of the better decisions I'd made in a while. He reminded me of myself at 20, quiet, hard-working, eager to learn. I started teaching him the ins and outs of fiberglass hull repairs, electrical rewiring, even some of the older two-stroke engine quirks. Over time, I realized I was building more than just a business again. I was building a space that could last beyond me, a legacy of sorts. Meanwhile, Meredith kept me informed on a few lingering threads. Apparently, Rachel had moved to Baton Rouge permanently. Her brother's name had popped up in a few small claims disputes, none directly tied to our case, but enough to tell me that their house of cards hadn't held up well. Meredith also told me Rachel tried to have the mural rights from the living room declared intellectual property, hoping to monetize them through some art licensing site. I handled it, Meredith said dryly. She won't be profiting from your drywall anytime soon. I laughed harder at that than I'd laughed in months. One crisp evening in November, I took the whaler out solo. The water was calm, air a cool 62 degrees. I packed a thermos of coffee, a worn-out navy sweatshirt, and let the wind do most of the work as I drifted. That night, I thought about legacy. Not just the stuff people leave behind, but what they pass on: habits, values, ways of showing up in the world. My father had been a quiet man, steady. He taught me the dignity in work, the grace of patience. My mother gave me the blueprint for resilience. I hoped I'd honored both. Sitting in that boat, surrounded by water and sky, I realized something else. I didn't hate Rachel anymore. I didn't forgive her, not in the way folks talk about on TV or in church pews, but I no longer carried her actions around like a weight. That part of the story was over. I'd survived it. Around Thanksgiving, I hosted a small dinner, just Meredith, Eli, my friend Joe and his wife from next door, and Miss Gloria from the diner, who'd always sent over extra cornbread muffins for Moby. It wasn't fancy. Paper plates, stuffing from a box, a pie I bought from the grocery store. But it felt like something solid. Like family. Eli brought his younger sister, Lila. She worked as a substitute teacher and was in town for the holiday. Smart, kind eyes. Asked good questions. Laughed at my bad jokes. She stayed after everyone else left, helped me do the dishes, and didn't make a big deal out of anything. Before she left, she asked if I'd ever been sailing near Dauphin Island. I said I hadn't in years. She smiled. Let's change that, she said. We didn't call it a date. Didn't need to. We both understood what new beginnings looked like. Cautious, slow, full of room to breathe. I wasn't trying to fill a space anymore. I was simply living the life I'd fought to keep. And every day I did, I remembered one simple truth. Survival isn't just about outlasting what tried to break you. It's about choosing what comes next and claiming it fully, calmly, and without apology. The Monday after New Year's, I sat on the front steps of the shop with a fresh ledger book in my lap. The morning air had that post-holiday stillness to it, quiet, soft light, not much traffic yet. Moby was curled beside me, chin on my boot, waiting patiently for our morning loop around the docks. But I wasn't in a rush. I was thinking about what I wanted the year to look like, not just in business, but in life. I'd always believed in structure, routines. I got that from my dad. He used to say, if you don't set your own rhythm, life will play one for you, and you probably won't like the tune. For the past year, though, it felt like I'd been dancing to somebody else's song. Between the diagnosis, the betrayal, the chemo, and the legal mess, I hadn't had the luxury of forward planning. But now, with my strength returning and the divorce finalized, I was done reacting. It was time to build. I started small. I added 2 new services to the shop: electrical system overhauls and fiberglass customizations. It meant longer hours and more specialized tools, but Eli was picking things up fast. The kid had good instincts. Better yet, he was dependable. I paid him more than minimum wage, gave him Wednesdays off for community college, and treated him like a partner, not just a hand. One afternoon, he brought up franchising. Said he had a cousin down in Pensacola who wanted to learn boat repair, and maybe we could teach him, license the name, expand. I didn't say no. I just nodded and told him, let's see how steady we can keep this one first. Truth was, I liked the idea. Quiet growth, passed hand to hand. In February, I bought a second boat, not for repair, just for me. A 19-foot center console I found through a retired Navy guy in Biloxi. It needed some elbow grease, sure, but I saw its bones. I spent weekends sanding the deck, rewiring the lights, restoring the chrome hardware. Eli helped when he could, but mostly it was my solo project, something that wasn't about business or survival, just enjoyment. Around that same time, I started seeing Lila more often. Never anything dramatic. Sunday coffees, walks at the state park, dinner at the crab shack with the paper napkins and sticky floors. We didn't call it dating. We just kept showing up for each other. I told her about the cancer, about Rachel, about all of it. She listened, didn't flinch. And when I asked her once if she thought I came with too much baggage, she said, only the kind that makes you more careful with people. That answer stayed with me. By spring, my oncologist scheduled my 6-month scan. Routine, they said, just to make sure things still looked good. But the days leading up to it weren't easy. I didn't tell anyone, not even Meredith. Just carried the weight of those memories alone. Sitting in that waiting room, again, the smell of it. When a nurse came back with the results, she smiled before she even sat down. Still clear, Clay. Everything's holding strong. I exhaled so hard it felt like I'd been holding my breath since last fall. That night, I made chili and cornbread and invited Lila over. We didn't toast or talk about scans. We just ate, laughed, watched the pelicans dive out on the bay, and let the silence between us say what needed saying. A few weeks later, I got a certified letter from Rachel's attorney. A formality confirmation that all property claims were settled, no further disputes pending. The tone was colder than it needed to be, but I wasn't bothered. I set it in the file cabinet under done and didn't look back. Some nights, I'd sit on my dock with Moby and think about all the versions of life I used to imagine the family Rachel and I might have had, the house we might have upgraded to, the retirement plan I was slowly piecing together. None of it had turned out the way I'd expected. And yet, sitting there, legs swinging over the water, I couldn't help but feel a strange kind of gratitude. Not for the pain, never for the betrayal, but for the clarity, for the reminder that strength isn't always about fighting. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go, when to shift course, when to build something new with the same steady hand you've always had. One Friday in May, Eli closed up the shop early, and we hauled both boats out into the Bay Mine and the old whaler. He drove one, I drove the other, side by side, cutting through the water like we had somewhere to be, though we didn't. Just two people who'd weathered storms and kept going. After we anchored and cracked open a couple of sodas, Eli said, "You ever think about what your life would have been like if none?" I thought about it for a second. Sometimes, I said, but mostly, I'm just glad I know where I stand now. He nodded. That's solid. And it was. Because the truth was simple. I may have been knocked down, but I got back up slower, wiser, and better balance. Summer came to Gulfport slow and sticky. The kind of heat that crawls under your shirt and stays there until nightfall. But I welcomed it this time around. After a year defined by cold hospital rooms, legal meetings, and waiting rooms with no windows, the sun on my face felt like proof that I was still here, still moving forward. The boat shop kept steady business. Word got around that we were fair, on time, and knew how to fix what mattered. Folks from up and down the coast brought their fishing skiffs, bay cruisers, and sailboats with stories baked into the hulls. I listened to them all while running my hands along weathered fiberglass and rusted-out brackets. Eli kept showing up early and staying late, which made me proud. He asked fewer questions now, more confident in his work. One day, I caught him quoting something I'd said to a customer word for word about never patching over a problem you should fix from the inside. I didn't say anything, just gave him a quiet nod. He'd earned it. Lila had become more than company. She was part of the rhythm now, Sunday mornings at the dock with coffee, Tuesday night meatloaf at my place, long walks with Moby trailing behind. We hadn't labeled anything. No pressure, just a quiet agreement to keep showing up for one another. And that was enough. On the 4th of July, we hosted a cookout at the marina. I smoked ribs on my old pit barrel, and Eli brought his sister, who played guitar while kids ran barefoot on the grass. Lila handled the paper plates and lemonade, making jokes with folks she'd only met once. It was the kind of day that reminded me why I never left Gulfport. That night, after the fireworks had faded and the breeze picked up over the water, Lila and I sat on the dock with our feet dangling just above the tide. She turned to me, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and asked, "Do you think you'd ever get married again?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to respect the weight of the question. I used to think marriage was about finding someone to build a life with, I said. Now I think it's about finding someone who can stand next to you when that life burns down and help build again. She nodded, eyes on the water. That's a good answer. A few weeks later, I finally finished restoring my second boat, the one I bought just for me. I named her Second Wind. Fitting, I thought. She wasn't flashy, but she was solid. Clean lines, rebuilt engine, new radio, and the same one my father once taught me to grip with both hands when crossing open water. I started offering weekend charters for local veterans and their families. Nothing big, just a few hours on the water, some stories, some quiet. One Saturday, an older man named Vernon climbed aboard with his grandson. He'd served in Vietnam, kept to himself most of the time. But when the boy asked how he learned to tie a proper knot, Vernon's voice cracked open like a tide-worn oyster. I watched them from the wheel, not interrupting, just steering steady. That evening, I wrote in my journal something Meredith had encouraged during chemo, a habit I kept. I wrote, "Some knots only hold under pressure, but if you tie them right, they don't come loose when it matters." In early September, Rachel reached out, not with a lawsuit, not with demands, just a letter. It arrived at the shop, handwritten on the kind of stationery her mother used to buy in bulk. I sat on my workbench and read it twice before saying a word. She said she was sorry, said she was in counseling, that she'd moved in with a cousin and there was no request for anything. Just an acknowledgement. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote, "but I wanted you to know I see it now. What I did, what cost you, and maybe me too." I folded the letter and put it in the back of my ledger. Not to revisit, not to dwell. Just to remind myself that closure doesn't always come clean. Sometimes it shows up scribbled in a letter from someone who once walked away without a second glance. That night, I took Second Wind out just past the inlet. Moby curled at my feet, the wind gentle but steady. I cut the engine and let the current carry us for a bit. No noise, no agenda. Just the sound of gulls in the distance and the water brushing against the hull like an old friend. I thought about everything I'd lost: the trust, the house that never became a home, the version of me that thought loyalty would always be enough. But I also thought about everything I'd gained: the stillness in my chest where the anxiety used to live, the people who stepped up when it counted, the quiet dignity of standing your ground without needing to shout. Lila called while I was out there. Asked if I wanted to come over for peach. I said I'd bring ice cream. We didn't say anything more than that. We didn't need to, because some stories aren't about what breaks. They're about what holds. Fall crept into Gulfport with a gentler hand than usual. The air lost some of its weight, and the sky took on that golden softness it only holds for a few weeks each year. It was the kind of season that makes you breathe slower, hold your coffee cup longer, and listen a little closer to the way the leaves rustle underfoot. By October, my hair had started to come back softer than before, a little lighter too. Folks joked it made me look younger. I didn't feel younger. I felt seasoned. And strangely, I was grateful for that. Some lessons you only learn the hard way. The boat shop was running steady, and Eli had stepped up more than I ever expected. I offered him a stake in the business, nothing major yet, but a path forward. He didn't say much, just shook my hand and said, "I won't let you down." I knew he wouldn't. Moby was still his same loyal self, older now, grayer around the muzzle, but always by my side. Sometimes I caught him watching me with that quiet attentiveness dogs have, like he understood every mile we'd come and every loss we'd carried. Thanksgiving came around, and for the first time in years, I hosted. Meredith brought her husband and their kids. Eli showed up with his sister and a pie that somehow never made out of the car. And Lila came with her mom, a soft-spoken woman who taught me how to make cornbread dressing from scratch. We ate outside under string lights and laughed more than we probably deserved to. After dinner, Lila and I stayed behind while the others packed up. We stood at the edge of the dock, the bay calm as glass. I reached for her hand, not out of ceremony, but because it felt right. Solid. Earned. "You know," I said, "a year ago I didn't think I'd still be here. Not like this." She squeezed my hand. "I know, but you are. And I was. I didn't have everything I once thought I wanted, but what I had now felt real, rooted, built on something that didn't shake when the wind picked up. In quiet moments, early mornings before the sun rose, or the soft hush just before sleep, I'd think about the storm that tore through my life. The diagnosis, the betrayal, the long nights where I wasn't sure I'd see the other side. And then I'd think about what grew in the aftermath. Strength that didn't need applause, relationships that deepened when everything else fell away, and a sense of peace that came not from winning but from enduring. That's the thing no one tells you about survival. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. You get up. You do the next right thing. You learn to trust again not the world, maybe but yourself. And you carry on, quietly, with your feet planted and your heart open. Because the world may burn down, sure. But if you've built something inside yourself that can't be touched, can't be stolen, or broken, or sold off, you'll always have in. That's not weakness. That's the quiet kind of strength. The kind that lasts.